Late last year, Ontario Hub's affordability journalist Kat Eschner took to the highways and byways of the province to find out how people were coping with economic uncertainty. One of her stops was Sudbury, and she joins us now on what she found. Hello, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Not too bad. Last time we spoke, you were in a Windsor hotel room and you were on your way to Sudbury. What was your focus in the greater Sudbury area? I believe it was Kathleen Street, correct?
Yeah, so drove to Sudbury from Windsor. It's quite a long drive, as you might be aware. I went to Kathleen Street because my editor had met a local resident who lives near the neighborhood that Kathleen Street is in, which is called the Donovan, and she had offered to show me around. Kathleen Street is part of the Donovan, which is a traditionally working class neighborhood that the city hasn't invested in really in a long time. And it's changing because of a lot of factors, and I wanted to look at how.
Okay, so tell us what you found, because when I was reading your article, there's a lot of people you spoke to. So what exactly did you find?
Yeah, I met a lot of people on Kathleen Street and in that area, partly because of my local contact who was kind enough to show me around. And what I found was a lot of disparity, which is, very much like many places in Ontario. So we're talking disparity along age lines, so who can afford to move to this, traditionally fairly affordable community. We're talking racial and job lines, and we're talking lines of ability. So some of the people I met were on ODSP and actually were looking to leave the area and wanted to move somewhere different, but couldn't afford to because of their low ODSP rates. And lines of access to capital. So this is, I also met a local business person who had managed to buy a few different businesses on the street and open up a pretty thriving little community because he had access to credit to buy these businesses.
All right, so you talked about housing prices and rental prices there. I do need to ask, how have price increases in housing affected that specific area when we talk about Kathleen Street, but also the greater Sudbury? Because obviously, when I think of, Sudbury and the greater Sudbury area, I'm thinking that's probably one of the few places that are quite affordable in this province.
Well, the short answer is it's not really anymore, partially because of this rampant housing inflation, both in terms of rentals and owned accommodations. I read about some of the numbers in the piece. And, troublingly, the increases in rent and the increase in housing costs are leading to an increase in unhoused people being unhoused, and just a degree of economic uncertainty and desperation, which is really troubling. One of the women I spoke to was Tracy Gregory, who is the executive director of the Sex Workers Advisory Network Sudbury. Kathleen Street and the Donovan, this area, sex workers have been, somewhat systematically pushed into this area over the last decade. So there's a lot of street sex work there. And she was telling me that her organization, is in urgent need of a drop-in center to serve this community, but also that the 50 to 100 people a month that Swans, her organization, works with, more and more of them are unhoused, and it's because of this economic uncertainty, the raising rents, and the fact that, historically cheap housing prices mean that a lot of the housing stock over the last 10 years has been lost to stuff like Airbnb or investment rather than being bought or used by locals.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit. When we talk about the cost of living has increased for everyone. You've been tracking the Consumer Price Index for a while now. That's sort of your beat, of course, on the side. When people ask what's Kat doing, she's got her eye on the CPI. Why is it important, not just for you as an affordability journalist, but why should Ontarians be really focusing in every month on the changes?
So CPI, like the Consumer Price Index, might sound dry, but I actually think it's really important to pay attention to, and I wish that I had historically, as a person in society, paid more attention to it. The CPI is the most robust accounting of inflation that we have. It literally tells us how much all the things we buy have gone up in price compared to, well, you can compare it a few different ways, but compared to a month ago, compared to 3 months ago, or compared to 1 year ago. And that 1 year metric is a really valuable one just from an individual perspective because it lets you see how much more your budget is. So like I was saying, you can look at your own budget through the lens of the CPI. It can really help you with personal budgeting. For example, with food, food has outpaced a lot of other things in general, but some commodities have gone up a lot more than others. So, when you're making your grocery list for the week, knowing that one or another, fresh vegetables, for example, currently are very expensive. Knowing that can help you prepare and plan meals around maybe using frozen or maybe using something different. And it's also important, like I was thinking about this, It's also important because it's political. Policymakers are watching this, both in government
Right.
and at the Bank of Canada. And the more you know about what's happening with inflation currently, the more informed you can be as a political actor yourself.
All right. With that all being said, what changes have we noticed in this time? You've been tracking the CPI for a number of months now. Some fluctuations seems to be trending down in some categories. Tell us about what you've noticed.
So it is trending down a bit. Overall inflation, which is the rate of inflation for everything, has been trending downwards over the last couple of months, driven by gasoline prices. Especially gasoline is a huge driver. But if you look at core inflation, so that's inflation, but without gasoline and without food, because both of those are very volatile.
Right.
That's been much slower
Okay.
to move. But core inflation encompasses all the other stuff we buy. So for an individual, that's important. Food inflation, like I was saying, it's really high. It's remained above 10% for months, and in some categories is several percentage points higher, which means that, the most vulnerable people, the people who are actually looking at every dollar they're spending on their food bill, are having to make completely horrifying and unacceptable sacrifices and changes to what they eat and how much they eat. I've written about this a lot with food banks as well. The other thing that I think is notable is that over the past year, inflation has become what we would call broad-based, which means that it's gone from just being gasoline, which was one of the original drivers, and a couple of other things that are really seeing a ton of inflation, to being spread throughout the economy. The extra costs of, for example, gasoline have spread into every point in the supply chain, so everything
Right.
costs more now. Which means that it's since so many different areas of the economy and of life are affected, it's very difficult to bring back inflation back down to the Bank of Canada's target 2% per year. The one thing that I haven't seen as much of as I would expect is wage advocacy. Where nearly everybody is losing out, your wages are becoming
Right.
worth less. And since inflation has hung around for a while and is anticipated to hang around for at least another year to 2 years to some degree, you would expect to see more people saying, well, hey, my money is not going as far. And some people have been saying that, some organizations and some unions have been saying that, but there hasn't been quite the push that I would have expected.
All right. So this CPI this month indicated that inflation is happening in an unusual rate in one category. What exactly is that and why?
That category is personal care products, which means everything from toothpaste and tampons to shampoo and mascara. This is a really big category. Prices in this category rose by 9.9% year over year. So that means between December 2021 and December 2022, which is the highest rate of increase since February 1983 during a previous period of high inflation.
Very long time. Kat, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Of course, we will continue to check in on this story that's very important to Ontarians.
Thanks so much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.